All right, everyone, welcome to the Virtual Media Center at the 2021 ANA Inspiration. Happy to have you all with us. We're here with LPGA Commissioner Mike Whan. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We'll open up with a few remarks from Mike, and then we'll open it up to questions from our media, both on site and in the Zoom chat room. If you have any questions in the chat room, please let me know on the chat, and I'll call on you. Feel free to turn your camera on and say hello to Mike. Mike, enough from me. This is quite possibly your last time speaking to me as my boss, which I'm living in denial of. 11 and a half years, your last trip here to the desert wearing the LPGA logo. What thoughts are running through your head as we take to the week?
I wasn't sure that's where you were going with that. First off, I don't ever felt like your boss. I think it was always the reverse most of the time we worked together. Just as you were asking that question, it hit me that when I took this job in late 2009, I flew to New York for Madison Square Garden's announcement. I took the red eye that night to San Diego to meet with all the tournament directors. And I don't think many people know this, but the next morning I got up and drove to the desert to meet with the craft people. You might know this, Larry, but my second official day, I wasn't even working yet, but I came out here and met Denny Belcastro and the team. And it was really great. We walked most of the back nine course. We had dinner. We had lunch overlooking, pre-COVID, overlooking the 18th green. And as he's walking to me in my car, he said, "You know, right, that 2013 will be our last year." I'm like, "To be your last year, what?" And he says, "Yeah, we've told the previous commissioner and the previous team that, so you'll have 3 years with us, 2010, 11, and 12, but we won't be here in 2013. So my literally first meeting with a sponsor was goodbye. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the one event I've been coming to, most of my golf fandom and career with TaylorMade and everything else. So, and then quickly learned afterwards that the LPGA Championship was no longer title sponsored, and we were trying to figure out where to put that. The British Open was going through a pretty difficult time in terms of sponsor renewal. And I remember thinking at the time, I might be in the job in a year and we'll be down to one major. And had a first board meeting and said to the board, majors are you build a house on a foundation. You build a tour schedule around the foundation of majors. So I'm really excited. That's not your question you asked me, but as I think about leaving here and this one being my last, the fact that we have these majors have been our foundation, at least the whole 11 or now, I guess 12 years that I've been doing it. And we really did build a schedule around these foundations. Obviously, we added Evian, but created the KPMG Women's PGA, created the AIG Women's Open. Obviously, the U.S. Open has been the U.S. Open, but it's exciting to think that what felt like pure fear back in fall of 2009 has turned into what this is, and we've built a schedule that luckily has been built on the foundation of these majors.
The majors certainly setting a foundation for the last 11 years, but what are some of the other things that you're most proud of looking back and as you leave the association where we are moving forward?
Well, I think when I started in when I got announced in late 2009, almost all the questions at my press conference were about global, all the influence from all the parts of the world. And I felt like all those questions were asking, like, why don't you go back? And I do know that there was plenty of players, caddies, sponsors, and employees that were wondering, why don't we go back? And I had taken a few brands global before, and I looked at this brand and I said, when we get to the other side of the tunnel, and that's what it is, it's a tunnel, you're going to love how this feels on the other side. I'm really excited about the fact that now other sports ask us, how do we get this global? How do you get your TV on so many different countries? How do you have players come from all over the world and play in the same forum? All you got to do is go to the Olympics and realize that what we're doing makes sense. I'll never forget my first press conference question at the Olympics was, how cool does it feel to have players from so many countries playing on one golf course? I remember thinking, be cool, because that's somebody who doesn't cover us, because we had, I think, 30 countries in that event. I said, next week we'll have more countries playing on an LPGA event than we have playing in the Olympics. So it's just neat to see. I'm very proud of that. And to your question, Armstrong, sorry, for your question, Christine, because I know your mom is kind of messed up when I call you by your nickname. But I think the coolest thing about this, and just bumping into Shirley, I was walking through the lobby. The thing that Shirley and the rest be most proud of what we've done for the future. The future of this game is so female, not just here in America, but all around the world. And events like this is what matter to these young girls. But I don't think if you'd have said 12 years ago to anybody that the future of the game, junior golf, was going to look almost 40% female back when we were always in that 13, 14, 15% range. That's what I think we should be most proud of, because this is important. But what we're leaving is more important, and we're leaving this game pretty female. I'm leaving this game a lot more female than I got here, thanks to a lot of people that made me look good. But I'm most proud of that. I'm really proud of this and the Symetra Tour and the LET and our 2,000 teachers all around the world. But the most important thing is, I don't think these women will have daughters that will have the experience my mom had trying to join the game in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they should be proud of that, and we should be proud of that.
Absolutely. One last question from me before we open it up. You mentioned the Olympics. We basically have a super season here with the 5 majors, the Olympics, the Solheim Cup. What are some of the highlights of the season coming up for you? And also to take this opportunity to thank companies like ANA and CME and AIG who have stood with us through what's been an incredibly tough year.
You know, it's funny, if I would have said back in 2010 that we were going to play ... fill in any golf course you want after that, that we're just playing this year, with, the Olympics and the Invernesses and the Atlanta Athletic Club. I mean, any one of those would have probably been the news story of 2010. Today, as we sit here in 2021, I don't think it's a news story at all, which actually makes it pretty cool that we're playing these kind of venues, and we'll continue to play these kind of venues going forward, not just in our majors, but even events like Solheim Cup that are having us and giving these women a chance to showcase themselves on those kind of historic venues. 2020, 2021 will be a year for all of us that I think we'll all remember for the rest of our lives. For me, it'll be conversations I've had, literally 50, with almost every sponsor we've had, and going through the scare they went through on their own business, the scare we were going through on my own business, and to wake up, in the last 2 years, which includes 6 months pre-COVID and what I'll call the early 6 months of 2021, we've added 11 official marketing partners and 8 title sponsors. And, so in the middle of all this, we have more corporate sponsorship today than we had when we started 2020. So in the middle of the last, 17 or whatever months, 15 months it's been. So that's pretty cool stuff. And ANA is a great example. Imagine if you're an international air carrier going through what we just went through, and to be here twice in the last, 8 months is a pretty impressive statement about ANA.
It's pretty awesome to be back here. At this time, we'll open it up for questions. Anyone on the chat, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to turn around. Who wants to go first? Steve, we'll start with you.
That way, Armstrong.
Yes.
Mike, what initiative is either in its infancy or halfway through that concerns you as you go through this transition?
I don't know. You know me better to know that there's probably not one. I think our partnership with the PGA Tour is really in its infancy. We've done some really cool things together to this point, but I think, having the men and women play on the same course, same field, both as, sanctioned event from us is something that I thought I would have done by the time I walked out. I think our new 9-year deal together with the PGA Tour, NBC, CBS, Golf Channel is in its infancy, but it's going to put us on a much better place, and including a lot more network television. All things that I would have probably, if you'd asked me 3 years ago, would be done now, but it's coming soon. I think we're just getting started with the Ladies European Tour. I mean, we were together for 90 days and added 7 tournaments. I'd love to see what 90 days in a non-COVID era could create there, but. I think my board, my players and my teachers are more committed to the global impact we can have on this sport, not just here in America, but all around the world, because of all those things. And so all of those things are new, but not infancy like I'm afraid will they grow up. They're going to be just fine. But all things that I wished we were farther along as I was walking out the door.
And as you walk out the door, can you spin forward 3 years and tell us what the relationship between the LPGA and the USGA will be like?
Probably not. I mean, I probably can't tell you what the relationship is like. I mean, I'm going to have a real good relationship with the LPGA. They're going to have a real good relationship with me. But where can we go with, with my knowledge of women's golf and their knowledge of championships and opportunities? I don't know. I mean, I'm really excited about it. I mean, at the end of the day, when you think about all the difference we've made in the future of this game for girls golf, the USGA is at the top of the list of the reasons why. And I've said to them many times, like, I wish I would see you guys on TV taking credit for it. Because I'm the one always on TV taking credit for it, because 1, I'm not afraid to take credit. And 2, I just like talking about it. But I'm going to talk about it at the USGA. I mean, I'm certainly not going to be happy at 37% of junior golfers. I think there's some really cool things we can do together. And you can put me on whatever boat you want to put me on, but some really cool things we can do for the development of the game in America and for around the world, that I think that together with the PGA Tour, with the PGA of America and the LPGA, I'm really excited about what we're all going to do together on the diversity and equity front. But I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm excited because I feel like their mission in growing the game and being a difference maker was what attracted me.
Mm-hmm.
Over here to Beth Ann.
Yeah, you were just talking about what you inherited when you came in with the craft contract. Can you tell us how many contracts are up this year for what the next commissioner might be facing when he or she steps in?
This is embarrassing, but I think any other year I could probably tell you that to a specific number. Right now, I'm not sure I could, mostly because contractually we're kind of a mess. Like if somebody didn't play in 21, they're playing in 22. Or if they didn't play in 20, we added a year on. So I'd probably have to walk through the schedule. But I don't have any significant concerns. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but this won't shock you. We're pretty close to announcing another new event for, that'll come in 22. So if a couple of events in 21 don't go forward, I think we're past the stage that you and I lived through back in the early 2010s through 15 of, trying to make sure we could keep it to a certain number. I think we're in real good shape. I don't think the new commissioner is going to come in and instantly be petrified about contractual sponsor deals. And I think right now, as a future sponsor said to me yesterday in a meeting, this is a real good time to join up with the LPGA. We feel good about what you guys mean and what you represent. And I didn't start a lot of meetings like that back in 2011. So I think it's doesn't mean the new commissioner and team won't have to work to bring in title sponsors and keep corporate sponsors, but we're not on the same kind of concern level that I think we would have had back then. And the good news is you're gonna see us and them keep adding sponsors and tournaments along the way.
Is there anything you can tell us about the commissioner search and how far along they are?
I would say the commissioner search is probably halfway, even though those on the selection committee would probably go, it doesn't feel like halfway. What I mean by that is there was so many candidates, hundreds of candidates, and some of them, pretty significant and senior that even if you weren't going to go forward, deserved to make sure that before we went forward, had those conversations. But they're just starting the interview processes now. So most of this has been tabulating, following up, seeing who's interested. But with my own personal experience with the USGA, a process that I thought might take 6 months took 6 weeks. And because in the world of Google and Zoom and Teams, it used to be, hey, Mike, when can you get to New Jersey? And we'll try to get the group together. And then you start doing date games. Now it was, how's Tuesday at 6? And I opened my computer in my living room and 6 other people opened their computer and you just had an interview with 6 people. So I think this process goes pretty fast. My guess is we're probably looking end of May. I think they're probably saying end of June, but I think internally they're targeting end of May.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Behind me to Karen.
Mike, what advice would you give to your successor on the dates of this tournament? I mean, even as you're speaking...
You're talking about ANA?
Yes,
Yeah.
Even as you're speaking, eyeballs are being taken away from this event by the women's amateur being played elsewhere. Is it sustainable to continue having this event in this state with what's going on at Augusta?
Yes, sustainable, yes. Optimal, no.
Right.
And I think with time... I think with time we'll move out of this date. Like I mean, moving a major sounds so simple to a fan or to a Twitter follower. To a commissioner, it requires 15 other people agreeing to move things around. The other thing is we don't want this major to feel any less major because of somebody else. And so moving it 2 weeks earlier hasn't been an option for us for a while. And by the way, when I talk about 2 weeks earlier, 2 weeks later, one of the most important things we need for this major is the 28 hours of live TV it gets. We could just say, well, move it a week earlier, move it a week later. Obviously a week later doesn't get it 28 hours for all kinds of reasons, and we'll all be next week in Augusta. And moving it earlier didn't give us that option, mostly because the Dell match play is so consumed on TV. So we had to find other windows on the TV schedule where we could generate those same kind of 28 hours of live TV. In the windows that we currently have, either the golf course and location isn't available, or it is available right in the middle of Coachella, which would actually be worse than the week we're in. I think we'll solve that longer term, but longer term is probably post 22.
Is the week after the Masters doable?
It's doable. It's just much more difficult here between weather, volunteers. As you know, a lot of our support here is volunteers that will leave in the next week or two. We're also in first week of Coachella. Average hotel rate here goes from 120 to 920. So it's just really difficult to just say, hey, move it back, because I'm afraid we might get better media support. We might get the same kind of TV coverage, but I'm not sure I give them the major that they deserve. So I think we can solve the date problem as long as we don't feel rushed to solve it. Like I said to my team, as long as their experience Thursday through Friday isn't detrimental, I'll go whenever you're going, but don't move it until you know the Thursday to Sunday is the Thursday to Sunday.
All right, we're going to go to Zoom for a call from Jim Alexander. Jim, you can unmute your mic.
Yeah, Mike, and Karen sort of touched on what I was going to ask, so I'm going to go in another direction.
Okay.
This thing's been going for 50 years, dating back to Dinah Shore, and some of us still refer to it as the Dinah Shore. But how important is this tournament in the greater context of the LPGA Tour? How much of a cornerstone is it?
Well, I think you know with your question, Jim. I mean, we don't have, and I wish we did, but we don't have 30 events that have been with us for 45 years. I mean, you can't go back and look at, you can go back and look at the Waste Management in the 80s and see what that tournament looked like, or go back and look what Fort Worth looked like. We don't have many of these. Toledo, Portland, here, where we can really talk about these women when they were 7, 8, and 9 watched this tournament on TV and dreamed of being here. So it's important there because we just don't have a lot on the LPGA of these long-term historical pieces. What I would tell you after being commissioner now, going on my 12th season, must-haves I've learned long ago. When I told people we were going to move from the LPGA Championship and create the Women's PGA together with KPMG, half the people in the world thought I was, had fallen off a ship. And really, when you wake up today, you look at that and go, what a great tradition we've created now for the future. So I would hate to see us ever leave here, but at the same time, if we did, would I be concerned about the future of the LPGA or the future of what we're creating? I wouldn't, because we'd only leave here if we could create something significantly better. And we don't have that, we're not facing that crisis today. As you probably know, this is not our last contractual year here. And I think whoever steps into my spot and the team that they'll inherit will realize that this will be goal number one. If we can't deliver here, we'll only leave here if we can do something better. So you hate to lose tradition, but as I always tell people, respect history, love history, don't be afraid to make a little along the way. If you can make a new history that's better, have at it. But this one would be tough to achieve that, I'll be the first to admit.
Mm-hmm. And one follow-up, going in a little bit of a different direction. Obviously, with the controversy in the NCAA over the men's and women's tournaments and sort of the unequal nature of the two, what the LPGA does not only for golf but for women's sports overall. What are your thoughts about that, and where your tour fits in that struggle for equality?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Jim, I mean, we're used to it. I hate the fact that we're used to it, but we're used to it. There's a lot of media people standing here that are used to it too. It's not easy to cover the women's game, of any game. Certainly not easy to cover the women's LPGA. So if I'm sure all the writers, yourself included, can attest that this isn't anything to say to your editor, yeah, I'm just going to go cover the A&A Inspiration, and they go, that's great. You probably have to fight for the lines you get for women. I have to fight for what we get here. I wish I didn't have to. It is what it is. I've said many times that I can justify it. I understand why there's different purses and different fans and different TV coverage for the men's game versus the women's game. I get it. I've seen the business logic. Thank goodness a bunch of Congress people back, 30, 40 years ago didn't wait for the business logic to put Title IX in and say it's just the right thing to do. I do believe at some point there'll be a Title IX in women's golf, and if you're going to cover men's golf on NBC, you got to cover women's golf on NBC. If you're going to have these purses, you should have those purses. But I'm not going to wait for it. In the meantime, we're going to fight for it. But was I shocked by what I saw in the NCAA? I wasn't. Live it every day. We're not tied to some other male entity. There's not some entity that at the end of the year I can call and go, you know what, we lost $12 million this year. And they say, I got you covered. For 70 years, we've been on our own. Proud of it, but also realize that we raise what we can. I wish this tournament was a $10 million purse, not a $5 million purse. But this is what we've got today, and we're going to keep building on it. I mean, when I started, I think our average major purse was a little less than 3, and now I don't think we have a major under 3, and most of our majors are between 4.5 and 5.5. So it's a battle, it's a struggle. It's one of the reasons, quite frankly, why I'm glad I took the job. Because as a male, and certainly as a white male, it would have been really easy for me to glide through life and never pay attention to this challenge. I also raised 3 boys, not girls. I never thought about as a father the future of the game of football or baseball they were playing. I'll never be able to think about sports or life like that again, because these athletes are in my head and in my life. So it's these athletes think about the future of the game. They think about what kind of experience their daughters are going to get in golf. They realize that they have to work a little harder for maybe a little less. That's all embarrassing to say as their commissioner, but But it's true, and we're going to keep fighting to make that truth go away. But currently, we're facing that truth.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to go over here to John Nicholson with AP.
What do you see for the immediate future or long-term future for Phoenix as an LPGA stop?
So we could be back there as soon as 22. And I couldn't tell you whether we'd be back there with the Founders Cup or we'll be back there with a new event, but we'll play in Phoenix. Like I said, if we'll be back there as early as 22 or as late as 23. It just works on so many levels between the great golf, the great fans, and how many players I have who live there. I mean, I'll just tell the next commissioner, if you don't figure out Phoenix, you'll wish you had. It's why we have 4 or 5 events in Florida. It works. It's good for the athletes. It's good for TV times. And, with our spring schedule leading into events like this, it's great for the reps. It's great for, we have a huge fan base there. So I have zero concern about the long-term
Could that be somewhere
viability.
where your partnership with the PGA Tour would come into play?
Maybe. To be honest with you, it's not as easy as you think with the PGA Tour, not because they're not good people. It's if I call Jay and say, hey, Jay, what do you think about this date? You can see their schedule. How many open weeks do they have? Not many. And then we've got to figure out how we can do something that could be either official, unofficial on both schedules. We've worked out those deals, but I don't know. I think, to be honest with you, for me personally, I would want Phoenix to be full field, official, because I wouldn't want any athlete to not be able to get into that field.
Behind me to Amy.
Hey, Mike, just to piggyback off of what you were just saying about your alliance with the PGA Tour, do you feel like that relationship is something that can help, to address some of these inequalities that we're seeing between the women's and men's side of the game? And is that something that you've ever spoken with them about?
I think it already does, to be honest with you. The PGA Tour had no real incentive to include me in their PGA Tour TV deal that they just did, but I'm part of that. They didn't need me, to be part of some of their promotional deals and TV production deals. They did that because I think they knew they could help. I think they like our product. They like her, but their members, no members of Jay are asking him how we doing with the LPGA. So I think for Jay and his team to take that on is just a great example of what stakeholders do. I don't know that the PGA of America needed the KPMG Women's PGA, but I think they thought it was the right thing to do. They thought they could do it, and it was, as a stakeholder, it's an important message that they could make to their members and to the rest of the people who play golf. The RNA would have been the RNA whether or not they took over the Women's Open Championship or not. And quite frankly, I'm sure the RNA is writing a check for that event, not receiving one. I find that pretty cool. I mean, when I decided to get involved with the LET in a joint venture, I asked Keith Pelley and Martin to not only join us, but to help us both financially and be on the board. And both said yes in one phone call. Never had a legal document that followed that. I just think those are stakeholders doing the right things. I mean, the Augusta National writes a check to us every year for the USGA LPGA Girls Golf. If you probably didn't know they did. If they didn't, nobody would know. But they like what we're doing. They believe it's important to the game. So yeah, I think I've said this many times. When I left the industry, golf, in 2000, I didn't really feel like the stakeholders of the game were in it together. They all had incredible programs, but if you asked them, they'd tell you about their program, not somebody else's. When you jump forward to 2021, I feel there's a cohesiveness among that group that the Olympics probably helped start, maybe the World Golf Hall of Fame helped start, but I would consider Keith Pelley a great friend, not just somebody who runs the European Tour. I would consider Jay Monahan calls me when he has challenges he's facing and vice versa. We don't talk about those calls, but there's a friendship there, and as a result, when you ask a friend for a favor, so what can they do? I don't really know, but I mean, I think they're already helping. You may not see some of those inequalities, but imagine if Jay just finished his deal with NBC, CBS, and the Golf Channel, and 2 years later, I went out to the market and said, "Here I go." Not sure what I would have had, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be what I have.
Just one other unrelated question. Do you have any update on when we might expect to see fans back out on site?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we will see fans until post Kingsmill. So, I mean, I wish I could give you a better answer, but as you probably know, these events get established about 90 days before we play them. I wish I was petitioning California right now for fans, because, I mean, having been to California a lot during the pandemic, it's a lot different today than it was even a month ago. And I think if we would have been talking to them right now about 90 days from now, I think we'd have some degree of fans and a broader footprint here, and we would have last week. But because you have to do that 90 days ago, and I think that 90 days ago nobody knew where we'd be vaccine-wise. And I think Kingsmill is the last one. I think Kingsmill is planning no fans post Kingsmill to be determined. I know U.S. Open, and Medihill will struggle with San Francisco. But I think this summer and from there on out, we'll have a pretty good fan footprint. We did it sort of the opposite way. I like the fact the PGA Tour was in California first and Texas and Florida later. We came to Texas and Florida early and came here later. But yeah, it bums us out, but we're playing, and we can't really be too unhappy about that.
Karen?
How would you explain to someone who's a fan of the Olympics but not necessarily into the weeds of golf how competitive it is to make the South Korean Olympic team for women?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a harder team in sport to make right now. Quite frankly, it's starting to look that way on the U.S. team as well, in terms of just the talent and world ranking players fighting, vying for one option. It was funny when we played the International Crown in Korea, and the top 4 players from Korea were on that team. In Korea, they were writing articles about the fact that you're looking at the Olympic team potential because it's just as hard to make that team, kind of based on the same world rankings. But imagine being the 9th best player in the world in your sport and wondering if you're going to be on the Olympic team for that same sport. And that's, kind of what they're facing. So that just tells you something about the power and the depth in that country. And like I said, I believe if not in 21, in 24, you might see the same thing in terms of trying to make the U.S. team.
And then a quick follow. Did you get any sense that in some ways for all that Inby's done on the LPGA Tour that her gold medal resonated more in South Korea?
Oh, I didn't get some sense. It's factual. I mean, when Inby was teeing it up to win her 4th major in a row, the Korean rating at TV was about 8. And you guys know because you follow enough TV, an 8 rating is Tiger winning the Masters, right? I mean, it's a huge number, right? But in Korea, and that's what you'd expect. Here she was about to potentially set history like nobody'd ever seen. When she won the Olympics, the TV rating was 27.1. So, I mean, just imagine Tiger at Augusta times 3, right, in terms of TV exposure. Did anybody miss that? Nobody I know that watches TV. So that's what happened with Inby. I mean, as she said, she went from being a really noteworthy golfer to being one of the most famous people in Korea in one weekend. Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, same is true, by the way. I'm embarrassing myself, but who won the gold medal? Who won the silver medal for the men at Rio? What's that? Henrik Stenson. So in his home country, when he was competing with Phil at the Open Championship, I forget what they said, but they had like 120,000 viewers, 10 times more when he was competing at the Olympics. So it's, as I've said many times, when people ask me, is it worth it, all that you have to put on the Olympics? Because it is a lot, right? And you guys have seen our 21 schedule. Imagine being an Olympic athlete this year and looking at your summer and trying to figure out where you're going to be and what time zone you're going to be in these major events. But it is the largest gathering of what I'll call casual golf fans, and maybe not even casual golf fans, currently non-golf fans. And so what sport wouldn't benefit from 10 times the amount of eyeballs that normally watch your sport? I mean, I can tell you for me personally, for traveling all around the world, I'm constantly in an airport where somebody will ask me a question about the Rio Olympics and has no idea that we've been playing since then. They just probably think we're like gymnastics and you just show up every 4 years. But for us, the world paid attention to women's golf for 4 days, and so that's worth it. Certainly worth it to us.
All right, Mike. Well, before we close, I know there's a story that you're wanting to share. You talk a lot about the founders and what they've meant for you, what they've meant for our tour. But I know you've got a pretty special story that a lot of this crew behind me doesn't know yet that you'd like to share before you leave.
Yeah, I talked to Armstrong last night. I said, I don't know if this is appropriate because it's always been an inside baseball story. There's always been a story for me, my board, my family. Like I really even talked to staff about this, but it was November 2009. I'm at the LPGA Tour Championship at the Houstonian. I'm not commissioner yet. I've been announced, but nobody knew who I was. It was a great week because you could walk around and nobody told you what was wrong with the tour. It was just a really great time to be a fan. And that night I had a drink, and this won't shock you guys, with Louise Suggs. And she said to me, kid, just keep it simple. And then she went on to talk for about an hour, and I thought nothing that she just said was simple, right? I mean, she talked about all the aspects of the LPGA. So at the end of it, I said to her, hey, Louise, when you say keep it simple, like, what do you mean? And I have this, it's not a napkin, but this little 5x7 card that I carried with me for years in my briefcase. And it just said, keep it simple on the top. And underneath it, she said, Mike, it's just this simple. And you guys can probably hear her saying this. She goes, give them, and she pointed out to a bunch of players that were in the lobby, she said, give them a better place to play. And I know what she meant, but that wasn't just courses and purses and TV, but all of those things. Give them a better place to play. She said, make them care about the future, which caught me off guard. I mean, as a brand new commissioner in 2009, I'm like, what do you mean care about the future? She goes, we have a tour today because we cared about the future, the founders. Make them care about the future. Founders Cup came from point number 2, like making them, how do I make them care about the future? Well, I got to create an event where we can talk about the future. And so she said, make them care about the future. I probably shouldn't say all that, but anyway, I'll tell you what the heck. I'm leaving. You guys can say whatever you want about me. She said, get the boys involved. And I'm like, what do you mean get the boys involved? She goes, the boys, the guys who run all the boys stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, PGA, USGA, RNA. She called them the boys. Get the boys involved. They'll help. And if you think about today, KPMG Women's PGA, the AIG Women's Open, the US Open and US LPGA, USGA Girls Golf. I mean, the European Tour and the RNA get involved in the Ladies European Tour. PGA Tour selling our TV rights. I mean, I really think the boys, as she called them, are involved. And the last one is this last one is not probably for your articles. It was just for me. She said, be a good and honest man. And I'm thinking at the time, I just met her. I'm thinking, does she know that I'm not a good and honest man? I mean, I remember saying to her, like, what do you mean be a good and honest man? She goes, this job will test you. It'll test you personally. It'll test you ethically. And it's going to be hard on you. And when you're facing a crisis, focus on your family first and think about them as your extended family, but your family first. I'm like, Louise, like I'm a family guy. Like, I'll be fine. She goes, I'm just telling you, you're going to wake up 4 or 5 years into this job and somebody's going to suffer. And it's okay if it's us. It just can't be your family. No one has ever said that to me before or after. And I'm pretty proud of that. My family would probably not agree that they didn't suffer, but be a good and honest man. And Julie Inkster said something to me, very similar timing, which is, we can handle honesty. We just can't handle lack of honesty out here. And so when in doubt, we've been in a lot of crises together, including 2020. If you just treat them honestly, I think they treat you honestly back. I'm not sure every one of them would agree that Mike's super honest, but I feel like when in doubt. So the one thing I will say to the next commissioner is keep it simple. Give them a place to play. Make them focus. Make the future important to them. Keep the boys involved, and focus on your family. When you're talking to them, just be honest. I think that was pretty powerful stuff. At the time she said it, I didn't think any of it was powerful, but I was smart enough to write it down. And that's probably a pretty good way for me to exit.
Well, thanks, Mike. You're definitely leaving the tour better than you found it. Thanks so much. Here's to a great week at ANA. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for the coverage, too, for all the years. I know it hasn't been easy.